Welcome to this WorkBuzz webinar. We love our WorkBuzz series of webinars. We like to lean into important topics that affect all things culture and employee experience. My name is Dawn Smedley. I'm head of culture here at WorkBuzz. And today I'm joined by my absolute favourite partner in crime, our Chief Experience Officer here at WorkBuzz, Mel Foster. Mel?
Thank you, Dawn. Yes, Mel or Melisande Foster, if you want to full name me, and I'm responsible for our client experience here at WorkBuzz. I started off life at WorkBuzz as a consultant and have since kind of grown with the organisation where we've had to enable our customer success teams, enable our support teams, but ultimately look after that whole of the client experience to make sure that we're partnering with you to ensure that you're successful in your employee listening journeys.
And for those of you who haven't come across WorkBuzz before or have only come across us through this webinar, then WorkBuzz is for everyone. We've designed the most flexible and simple survey platform to reach every employee wherever they are and whatever they do. It's what we're really passionate about, and it's the fastest way to gather insights to really help you identify areas for improvement, to retain staff, attract new employees and build a culture where every voice matters. And just like Mel has, I'm really lucky to have worked in culture and employee experience now for a long time, hence the grey hair, and love being part of the WorkBuzz gang with our vision to improve the working lives of 1 million people. So today we're going to be talking about action planning, and this was prompted by a recent LinkedIn post being very vocal around the concept of "you said we did" having had its day. And as always at WorkBuzz, we like to lean into things. We like to face into these conversations. So we thought we'd get you all together, and we're really glad you've joined us, to have a healthy debate about this and to hear from you what's working and what's not. And we'll also be sharing our thoughts, our perspectives and our experiences from lots of the organisations that we're partnering with. And hopefully what you'll get out of it is an exploration of these three things, really. So how to identify key areas and build an action plan from your employee surveys, our 5-step approach to driving long-term organisational change, and why you should automate your processes to guide people leaders in your business. We know they've got enough on their plate, so how do we make life as simple as for them as possible? But it's going to start with a little bit of debate. So we know when it comes to employee listening and surveys, it often comes unstuck in the lack of action that happens on the back of it. And also frustration from amazing HR and comms teams like yourselves who have taken action, done amazing things, put all the fabulous initiatives in place, but your employees haven't realised that the reason the action was taken in the first place was because of what came out of the surveys. There's that disconnect. So you said we did. It works, right? It does what it says on the tin. Or does it? So let's start with a poll and see what you think. This requires me being technical, so just bear with me. I'm just going to launch our first poll. Are we ready?
Yes.
Are you fed up with "you said we did"? Yes, no, I'm on the fence. Oh, 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 oh.
Oh gosh, there's some quick fire voting here.
We could sway some thinking here today, Mel.
I did not expect this. How many of you are more sat on the fence than anything? Oh, and it's, as somebody that's always gets challenged about having neutral options in a survey, this is fascinating. It's good to see.
It's interesting though, right? Well, we're going to lean into some of those things right now, and then we're going to run the poll after Mel and I have discussed some of these areas. But as we said, we really want you to, these are the results, by the way. So there you go, majority sitting on the fence. We're going to run the poll again afterwards, and we're just going to lean into 3 key areas, but use the Q&A and tell us your experiences as well. Tell us why you're on the fence, and throughout I will keep an eye on those questions as they come in and we'll answer them live as well. So Mel,
Hello.
Who is the we? You said we did. Who's doing the action in? And did they even understand what the feedback meant?
I mean, very good question and a very fair challenge that I think we all typically see. For me, and for most organisations that I work with, what we've seen is that the we is all of the feedback that we've collated. That's what we're saying when we say you know, you said, and the we did. The we is well, the you is who's fed back, and then the we is the people that are actioning it. And depending on your organization, very much depends on who is actioning feedback. What I believe is that with action planning, it needs to come from two views, as in we need a top-down view about positively impacting the majority of voices, which is what you get when you survey all your employees. You get the majority of voices and you can pinpoint the positive changes that you can make to impact the wider majority's experiences and improve that. But also there needs to be a bit of bottom up, because in terms of your area of control and positively impacting the area of control in the areas that you most commonly operate in, you need to have that bottom up voice combined with the top down approach to action planning to get that done. So when it comes to the we, for me, actually, the collective we are leaders of the organization right at the top, but also the teams that are creating their own actions to feed upwards and share their messaging.
And what have you seen work really well when it comes to doing that across our clients and partners?
It's very varied for different clients and partners, because frankly, despite us not always having hierarchical organizations, hierarchies do exist. And sometimes we need to respect the flow of information, and action planning has to sometimes filter from the top down. What I see working best is when people have thought about it way ahead of time before their survey closes, and have set line managers and the people that are responsible for driving action plans from the bottom up clarity as to how to action plan and what they'll be expected to do once the survey closes. The same comes with leadership team alignment. 90% of the time, I would say most leadership teams have a good gut feel about what's going to come out of their survey. So it's almost acknowledging that if you have a plan already in place as a leadership team, that this may bring a little bit of new insight, but hopefully not completely transformative to change your business plans and steer you completely off course, because otherwise there's a sense of a wider problem there if your leadership team's that poorly engaged with where the business is heading. So I think there's the knowing what to expect, being prepared for it and ready to go at the time that you are going to release results, for me is what is really critical, having that role and responsibility in your mind.
I think we've seen, I think when I'm speaking to organisations a lot that might be at the beginning of this journey, it's about setting that intent from the start, isn't it? So almost before, like in the run up to it, it's take people on that journey with you. So not just at that senior level, but all the way down to frontline managers. And I think especially when you have a high proportion of your workforce that potentially aren't sat in front of computers, that are out on manufacturing sites, that are in restaurants or hotels or harder to reach demographics, then actually some of the best ideas that we've seen have come from the point at which you engage with those frontline leaders around helping to form the questions almost. What do you want to know? Because then it makes it easier to take action, because actually they're invested in it. They've said, oh yeah, we really wanted to ask that question. And actually that makes it really easy, because I can go back to the teams and tell them this because it's a quick win. So
Agreed. And I think it's about thinking it through very early in planning stages about what's in it for me, for each audience.
yeah.
So for leadership, for each line manager, for the people that are filling out the survey, we should have that answer really clear in our minds before we even run any survey, so that we know exactly what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve and what people should be doing.
So the we can mean different things, right? So the we can be top level, top 3 priorities for the organization, and that's what we're doing. But it can be the next layer down, and it can cascade all the way through to the point where the we could be a team that you've tasked with creating 3 actions, and that's all it needs to be on the back of the survey, and then helping that leader understand that what they need to be doing as well is keeping that conversation going. It's not a one point in time conversation to be had. It's just keep doing it until hopefully culturally this becomes part of what we do here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's always a place, in my view, for engagement champions or forums, which are a group of people from across your business that are driving engagement. They help you frame the messaging. They help you build participation in the survey, help people understand why you're running it and why they should participate, but ultimately as well, help keep action planning alive for when there are gaps in people wanting to share with leaders or sharing more informal lines to HR, then those champions are really critical for collating that information, and because people will share more with them, and also there's typically a higher degree of trust when it's peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
So having champions in place, I think, is something that definitely helps.
We've got a good question here from a very familiar name, James Quincy. So
Hi, James.
Hi, James. Would you recommend hitting the middle manager audience as well to ensure they knit the top and bottom plans together?
I mean, the answer is it depends on your organisation, as per everything. This is typical Mel Foster ways out of answering the question directly, but if you are trying to create action plans at that middle level, if that's where you believe that there is a need for us to act, and you can see that in your data from, I mean, James, in years past or anything like that, then they are a great group to bring alongside. I think we all know that we promote people quite easily from technical roles into line manager positions, and those middle managers then quite quickly can flow upwards. But we've got to revisit their softer skills, their ability to take huge amounts of employee data and information and feedback that they're getting, to rationalize it and come up with action plans. So I think they're a great population because they're hugely influential across their spans of control, but also what one middle manager is doing, others will quite often copy because they're a more competitive level than what you would see at lower levels, or potentially higher when you come to leadership teams that have to work together.
I think to add to that, I think when you move to a more agile way of listening as well, I think what we're seeing happen more frequently now is a subset of questions going to managers and people leaders where we're asking them like what help they need and what support they need when it comes to action planning as well. So I think it's an audience that often get a lot of bad press,
Yes.
and it's how we set them up for success. And as Mel said, like because the requirement now and the expectation on leaders is higher because of the softer skills, we've really seen that change up in terms of what we're seeing in survey results across all of our client base since COVID. And we need to continue to listen to that group, because if we set them up for success, we know that they're going to have the biggest impact potentially across the whole organization if we get it right. So I think that ability to apply logic in your surveys and ask a subset of questions within this, even to take them on that journey with you, if you can't literally get everyone involved from the beginning, but you can loop people in at key points to kind of really help take them on that journey with you.
Yeah, exactly. And they can make or break culture.
Yeah.
And we know that they are important culture carriers because they can lead very effectively or not in some cases. So really tough times there.
And just going back to the who is the we, I hope that answered it, James, but keep the questions coming, everyone.
Yeah.
Just if we think about you said we did, is there a degree of actually kind of there's a requirement for the data to come back quickly, right? Because like if I complete a survey and then like 6 months pass, I've got no idea of remembering what I put in my survey. so like,
yeah,
did I say that? Did we do anything? Did I say that? Did it?
even
So it doesn't matter who the
something
we
you
is.
did this morning, I'm not confident with you at this point. So agreed. And this is it. It's closing the circle as speedily as possible, and also making it more relevant to the audience. I think sometimes at an organizational level, we communicate organizational level results and we assume that that's enough, but it's not. It needs to filter down to the locality of that person and their team, and what does that sound like for them. And that's where, again, thank you, James, for the question, but middle managers play a really critical part to filter everything down and make sure that it's relevant for your area, because what potentially 10,000 people said doesn't really matter to my team of 12 here that I work within and operate within. And that's potentially a more important discussion that people need to hear, and communication that people need to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's just putting some simple parameters in place around how to action plan and why it matters. So we're very passionate about people understanding the why here, but why do it? Why take action? Why is it important to communicate back? We know that it closes the loop, but actually create guides, give people the opportunity to, if you're giving them survey results or you want them to be involved in that conversation, we often talk about areas to celebrate, investigate, improve. Like, we love having areas to celebrate. It changes the way that you communicate after a survey closes, because then it's not just about response rates and engagement scores, but it's about your culture stories. It's about what makes you who you are. And it's a great narrative to go out to leaders with afterwards, to say, oh, it was so nice reading the stories. And actually, we've got this really tough month coming up, but just remember why we're proud to work here. So I think reminding people that it isn't just about what needs improving, but it's about kind of celebrating what makes your organisation unique. And then people will perceive the surveys differently, because it's not just a survey, it's a genuine way of putting employee voice at the heart of everything that you do.
Yep. Exactly.
Right.
I'm going to be on the other team. No, so we've had a question in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, we've got another one here. Hang on.
Oh.
You said we did, Katie. Hi, Katie. You said we did is what it says on the tin, on the fence because it is boring. Is there an innovative and creative way to message? Good challenge,
Katie,
Katie.
spoiler alert. Yeah. Well, how about we answer that one in a minute, Dawn? As in, we've got that coming up, but really good question.
So,
and
Katie, we will pick that up. We've got some ideas that might help. So debate topic 2, nothing new is driven by feedback. You just take the actions you already plan to do. We don't hear about any of it until, funnily enough, another survey is about to launch. Gosh, we're a cynical bunch out here.
I've been an internal communicator in-house in the past, and I know that I'm that person, as in, oh no, we've got a survey launching in 2 months. We better get a come out. We've all been there, guys. It's fine, and it's human nature. But what I would say around actions is, when it comes to employee experience, my belief is that you'd have quite a poor leadership team or people team in place if they didn't already have a sense of things that they needed to change or disrupt and tweak around your employee experience ahead of having full feedback from everybody. When it comes to employer research and listening, the survey is just one vehicle for doing that. There are other things like observations, which are really important to see what's going on with the organisation. The hearsay that we get down the grapevine is, although it's not formal, is really critical feedback when you're working in a role with people. But also interviews, focus groups, whether they be formal or informal, there's a lot of ways of collating information about the employee experience and collating that feedback so that you have an idea about where the plan's going to be. The survey should help your HR teams, leadership teams understand that that is the right direction and confirm some of their hypotheses. That's a big part of the role I think it should play. But it's also taking the spirit of continuous improvement to also use it as a way of spotting gaps in what you didn't think existed as a problem, and going further into the data and seeing exactly, you could pinpoint where that problem is happening rather than spreading the solution too far or broadly across an organization. So for me, that's where I think it's really, really important to survey, but also the gut feel and listening in our day-to-day jobs is also just as critically important.
Yeah, and I think where that takes my brain to is that it's really important not to just look at the results at an overall level, that as you get more mature on your employee listening journey and you're able to break those results down, to Mel's point, kind of, it's really making sure that those actions are taken based on who a person is, what role they have, which team they're in. And when you're able to do that, then you're really able to tailor that messaging, those actions, on the back of different groups. But then that brings another thing in, an element of complexity around the fact that, you know, we shouldn't make generalizations, and actually the intersectionality of the data is really important, especially when we're talking about D&I, inclusion, equity. But I think there's an ever-growing need to be able to compare, combine data, and do that quickly, so that as you're bringing in new initiatives, as you're talking about actions and how they're going to be rolled out, then it's making sure that kind of we're really intentional around how we do that as well. Is that fair, Mel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything needs to be planned.
Yeah.
This is something, when it comes to the communications plan, the reason that this feeling happens and we get this sense of, oh, you're only coming out with this now, is because we're not keeping an open conversation. And as internal communicators or people driving employee engagement within our organizations, we need to think of this as a critical component of successful employee listening. It's that constant touch points and closing the circle and check-ins.
Yeah.
Even if you can't complete an action, why have you pivoted? Explaining it in a human manner. Those things are priceless, really, in terms of getting employee buy-in.
And when we were prepping for this, actually, and in follow-up to today's webinar, we'll share a link to another one that we did last year, I think. And we had 3 clients. We had Whistle, Five Guys and Balfour Beatty Vinci on a panel discussion talking about internal comms, but all aspects of employee listening. And it really brought to life kind of that transparency around what you can and can't do. I think it was Danny at Whistle that was, Danny might be on today actually, but Danny at Whistle was really talking about how when they can't do things, they're really honest about it. And that has gone down so well because it just builds up that trust. And, you know, we can't do everything. We can't boil an ocean. Is that a phrase? Is that a phrase? I think it's a phrase.
Yeah. Boil the ocean.
So it is really about just having that really open conversation at all levels, really about what's possible. And I think in the article that's on here, the Forbes article, it talks about control, influence, and accept. What you can control, what you can influence, and what you just have to accept. And I think, again, when you're pulling guides together to help managers when it comes to action planning, it's 3 really good things to consider. What's within my circle of control? What can I do something about? What can I influence at the bigger picture level or kind of the next level up? And what do I just have to accept in terms of things that are out of my control and I can't change? But I think it's a really great way of looking at like survey results through that lens. I'm going to stop talking. We've got some chat coming through. So Will, thank you for commenting, Will. I'm from the NHS. We have an annual NHS survey and some people ask for surveys outside the main survey. My theory is that people don't like to be surveyed more than once unless something is done about the first one. What is your view about multiple surveys? Mel?
Yeah, survey fatigue is a real thing, and it typically exists because you're not doing anything. But the last time I gave you feedback, exactly as you're saying, Will, that's where we see the crux of the problem. But it's about how are we utilizing the feedback and what are we putting into action? That's the question. I think my view on multiple surveys is that it works if it helps to add more information to the what you're trying to achieve and the action that you're going to take forward, or if you have actually acted on the feedback and then need to check in and then develop it further. I think Tanya's given some really helpful suggestions as well. So again, the chat continues, and this is exactly what we'd love to see at WorkBuzz, this community almost sharing their own ideas and experiences.
Yeah, because Tanya says the NHS survey doesn't give enough details. If organisations are truly interested in what staff feel about working within your organisation, then you need to ask for further detail. I think you just need to be honest around the need for the further info, and you need to commit to utilise that info and commit to change. I don't know, I'm reading this out, but they're having a whole conversation here. Brilliant.
I mean, it's brilliant. And I think what's really difficult with the NHS, and it's not one of our clients, it's not the survey we run, but I completely understand there's a balance there because there's so much for them to ask you around safeguarding, evidencing for CQC in the UK. Sorry, guys, this is very focused on NHS over here in the UK. But it's a really fine balance for them to ensure that they've got enough of the questions that cover them in terms of that reporting upwards and what you're going to need to for evidence to demonstrate that you are giving the right quality of care, compared to ensuring that we've got that depth of employee experience. And I think that's a really difficult challenge to have, and especially when you're operating for a trust or a specific hospital or area. There is a call to have further employee listening channels, but it's how you run that. Is it a survey? Is it something else that you can have discussions with, exploring those opportunities?
I was actually on a call with an NHS trust this morning, and we were talking about this in the premise that this was happening later today, and we were talking about targeted surveys as well and how powerful they can be in terms of, you know, we often say let the data lead the data. So it could be that you run a survey and you see some results that are affecting just the radiology department or a different team, and all you want to do is find out more and get that extra layer of insight to help you better understand what action can be taken. And that's where the power of kind of ad hoc surveys can come in, because it can really enable you to ask one question, 5 questions, but it gives you a layer of insight kind of that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Yeah, and thanks, Tanya.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
So NHS is the National Health Service here in the UK, but like in a lot of the company that I worked for previously in terms of healthcare as well, I know a lot of the same challenges exist from a healthcare perspective in terms of recruitment, retention, social care, all the same challenges, just a slightly different structure in terms of how it all works. But love that the chat's going on. I love that you're all helping each other. Let's keep that one going. So we'll send the follow-up deck afterwards, and these articles are really interesting because we've used it as a prompt for our little debate here as well, but it will add some thinking and thoughts to what's already coming through on the chat as well, but keep the questions coming. Right, any more to say on that, Mel?
No, not from me,
No?
unless there's any questions specifically on that. But
any questions on that one around nothing new is being driven by feedback? I think for me, again, it comes down to asking the right questions. I think employee listening has changed so much in the last few years, and just having that ability to really ask questions that are linked to the outcomes that you're looking to affect is so important in your tone of voice, just in a really simple way that makes it easy for people to understand what you're asking of them. So important. And I think it's true that every organization is unique, so we have to give you the ability through what we do to enable you to really think about what are we trying to solve for and how do we help you ask the right questions to get there. And I think with all of this, if nothing new is being driven by feedback, then we're asking the wrong questions. So again, it's sense checking, it's stopping, it's reflecting, it's saying, okay, we put this together 3 years ago. So much has changed. We've got all of this coming ahead of us in the next 3 years. How do we ask the right questions to help us get there and almost put that stake in the ground? So I think that's my 2 pence on that part.
No, absolutely. Future visioning is also really, really important for employees and employees that you may never have come across again, as in our bases continuously change. We always lose people, we always add people. So there's always new opinions in the mix to understand and think about.
Yeah, thanks for the continuing chat. There's a case study that we can share afterwards about how we've helped a company called Home Instead link engagement to CQC ratings as well. That could be interesting for those of you even who work in the NHS. There's some great examples of how they've built almost a culture around employee listening and a brand about pursuing excellence, achieving quality, which has really helped build momentum around response rates and a real culture around their employee listening as well. Right, topic 3, the campaign is old and tired. Katie, this one's for you. You said we did is the least original motto, and we've seen it 1,000 times already. It's also patronising and doesn't acknowledge our involvement in the doing. Ooh.
Ooh. It's, I would say, out of all the arguments, this is the one that I probably side with the most. But I would say you said we did for me shouldn't be a campaign. It's an ethos. It's a way of working and delivering back feedback. There's loads of other ways to wrap this up, as in I've worked in-house in comms roles where we had it under a banner of My Countrywide. For everything that we were doing at Countrywide, it was really clear that campaign had to do with gathering feedback and making changes to that employee experience. I've seen the same with clients working on things like Your Voice, having very clear campaign wraparound, not just the name of the campaign, but the visual identity of it plays a major part in helping your employees translate how their feedback is then taken through to action. But I actually spent today less than a minute typing a quick prompt into ChatGPT. And all that I asked it to do is brainstorm one-line phrases for organisations to use internally to share updates on actions taken against feedback given in employee surveys. I mean, we all like You Said We Did because it does what it says on the tin. ChatGPT came up with even more solutions, and here are some of just my favourite ones that it came up with. There was feedback loop. see how we're closing the circle. I mean, if you've got any circle in your logo and you're not writing that one down immediately, run away with it now. This is all for free as well. We've got things like action in motion, your feedback at work, feedback fueled. Again, if you're automotive, doesn't that make sense? Feedback fueled, updates on our actions. So many ideas just from me typing a quick prompt into ChatGPT that again, that's a really good starting point. What I use ChatGPT for at the moment for myself is anything that I feel like I need a kicker on the creative side. It starts giving you the ideas, and then what you can do is take those ideas and lift them and make those changes. I really believe in the ethos. We have to keep communicating. We have to keep that cycle going and plan ahead those communications updates. But it makes it a heck of a lot easier when you've got a decent motto and campaign to tie it against.
Yeah, it's building the brand around it, isn't it? And I think once you have got something that you can hang everything off, then it makes a big difference, because everything that you do can link back to that. So it becomes something that people are familiar with. So I think it was, again, I was like listening back on that webinar, and just, we've got such a powerful bank of information in there. But I think it was Whistle Again that we're talking about icons, or was that Five Guys, where they said like they created infographics and each action had an icon. So they used video, they used different media when they were going back and reiterating kind of what action had been taken, then it always fed back to one of the icons on there as well. So again, it's consistency of message.
So important, isn't it? And also just remembering that people absorb communications really differently, as in it's important to have the different channels, different ways of reaching people. So what might work for Dawn and I as in having a meeting, for somebody would be better as a written communication, for somebody else is better as a visual poster, for somebody else is better as an infographic. So you've got to put out almost the same message several times in several different formats for it to be accepted. But having exactly what Dawn's saying, that recognizable visual identity or tile across everything, is a really easy way of picking that up across everywhere.
I think
have pasted all ChatGPT's ideas into the chat, so feel free to share and steal.
But I think it's we talked about intent earlier on in the call, where you can really set that intent through the brand that you create. So even having your voice matters, you know, things like that can really begin to build the sentiment behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think what I always say is, like, at every level, you need people to be talking about the survey in the same way. So you don't have the people going, oh God, it's another survey coming. It's really being the positive advocates for all of it, and, you know, pushing back and saying, you know, well, yeah, we might not have done it properly before, but I've been there and I've heard what everyone's saying, and we are going to take action this time. And if you have those culture carriers across your organization that are reinforcing that are instilling that, like, every step of the way, then it's going to help you. And my biggest kind of tip is to convert the cynics. So those
Yes.
that kind of maybe have, and we've probably all had a bad experience of completing an employee survey, whether it's the length of it or kind of whether we believed it was confidential, all those reasons why we feel distrusting of surveys. There is an opportunity to turn it around, and I think you just have to have those conversations, often face to face or in person. But if you convert those people who are cynical around it, they can be your biggest advocates, and they can impact on your response rates and the whole piece the most.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, those, I used to call them trolls when I was in house, but those people that would troll me on the internal intranets, start being quite cynical about things that were coming out, having those one-to-one discussions with them definitely changed my life when I was in an ICE.
One of the amazing clients that I used to work with, I don't know if some of you on the call might know her, she's called Vicky Gledhill. She works at Cox Automotive now. She's amazing, but she used to do exactly that. So if someone came to her with a question or any feedback whatsoever, she always took the time to pick up the phone, have a conversation with them. Honestly, it's amazing how that turned around people's perceptions of what they were doing. It was incredible. So
yeah,
and
so
it is
simple,
it's
but
listening,
it's
right? It's what we do.
Yes.
But it is like
Exactly.
really truly listening to people and understanding that that's their truth, and, like, you know, it's our job to really help them understand kind of what we're doing differently, why we're doing it, and kind of like and ask for their help in moving it forward. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do.
Agreed.
Right. Any other comments from all of our lovely listeners around that? Katie, did that help? I don't feel like I'm going to go back to Katie's question. On the fence because it is boring. Is there an innovative and creative way to message? Yes, I think there is. I think absolutely. If Katie, I know you well. I think if I think about your brand that you have, I think you do an amazing job at kind of setting that intent. But from a brand perspective, just keep going with that and then be consistent. Just keep doing what you're doing and kind of repeat it and reinforce it. And that's how you'll get it to land in your culture in the best possible way. Katie says it did. We're doing lots of competitions. Amazing.
Yeah, that definitely works as well. If you ever want to run the internal competition, let someone come up with the name and campaign and then reward them for it. That's a great way of using that hive mind. Great shout, Katie.
Right. So after hearing the debate, kind listeners, are you still fed up with You Said We Did? Have we managed to help you understand kind of more about our views of the world? I can't remember how to do the poll now. Just bear with me.
Yeah.
Out here, I'm going to do the poll again now. So
I would ask as well for anyone that was on the 19% of no. You've heard the three things that we've talked about, but is there anything else that was sitting a bit awkwardly with you and a reason why you said or yes, that you were fed up of it? What's sitting awkwardly with you about why you are fed up with it? In the chat, you can add a perspective or ask a question if you want to.
So I think they're being very kind to us. Well, it's still moving. See
what we did. Yeah, don't count your chickens too early, Dawn.
Me and Mel are not we had to swap roles because I'm not good at conflict. So
and even though I put Dawn on a debate team against me, she's ended up also joining my team. So if question for anyone next time, don't ask Dawn to debate with you because she'll just wants to find the synergies because that's what she's all about, synergies and partnership. But I should have known this.
So I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results.
Well, we've made an influence.
Yeah, so less people
right
on the fence. Still fed up? No, kind of majority. Some yes, completely get it. I think ultimately there isn't a right answer to this. It really is about what's right for your organization. I think to summarize from us, I think simplicity is key. I think when you're messaging, just keep it simple and make it easy for your people to close the loop between the surveys and the fact that you have taken action on the back of it. That's the miss sometimes, is that the joining of the dots doesn't happen and you've done all that hard work and they're still not seeing it. But then again, it's an opportunity because there will always be things that people aren't aware of, even though you've tried to communicate it on multiple channels in multiple ways. So again, it helps you understand where people are struggling to access the right information at the right time, so you can continue to evolve. So it's not just about raising awareness of new things, it's also sense checking to help people understand what's already there. And that can be a super quick win because you've already done it. So again, it's we heard from the last survey that actually lots of people are struggling to access our benefits portal. We're going to be launching some roadshows where you'll have the opportunity to go and kind of do this in person. You can meet the team, you can find out more about all the benefits that we have available. So again, it's just closing that loop on the You Said We Did and kind of continuing to raise awareness, because what you don't know, you don't know. So I think it's often just kind of keeping that front of mind as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Katie. I think you summarised it really nicely for us.
Yeah.
It's a concept. It's not the campaign or wording that you should flow with, though. I think that's really important. That's the one takeaway that I would probably take from this. Just conscious that there were some people that are still fed up. So is there anything else that we should talk about or debate before we close off the debate around why you shouldn't be as fed up? Any questions? No.
Okay.
Easy.
So Mel, how do you identify key areas when you're building an action plan from your employee surveys?
Yeah, I mean, this slide is it's very simple because this is what I'm all about. But I think around not focusing on low scoring questions, pay will always be a low scoring question. If you ask me today if I'm paid enough, I will tell you no, because in human nature, I will always want more. Um, don't focus on those low scorers. It's more about those questions that are truly driving engagement. So, what are the questions that in the employee experience that will have the impact to people being able to engage with you or not? Typically, if you've got hygiene factors at a standard level, you can ignore a lot of those gripes around them if they're lower scoring questions, but looking at algorithms about those key drivers of employee engagement and making sure that we're looking using some maths to focus on what that looks like for a wider group. And within a lot of platforms that should already be built into your platform. But also focusing on your area of control. So Dawn said it earlier and about it being in that article. What's in your sphere of control? What's in your sphere of influence? Anything outside of that is probably something that you need to put to a side for this point in time. There's certain things that you can do within your direct teams or within your organization and make those changes to. But then there's other things that you can potentially influence. So you can influence, let's say, if it is something around, I'm not sure, having the right benefits to hand, then you can probably influence that with having enough feedback and data points from your team to say this is what we should put in place. But ultimately, for me, I think it's also looking at how you can automate things to take a lot of the manual workload out of it. If you don't have to go searching for those points of data, then very much helps you start to analyze and pinpoint where to focus your activity and move things forward from. Also, even looking at automation from the point of how do you automate updates as to where you're going with the action plans, and how do you make sure that those are always communicated back? Even if that automation is a reminder to yourself, that's better than having nothing in place, because
Yeah.
it's so easy for it to completely fall off a ledge because you're all very busy people typically that are juggling more than one priority.
And I think when it comes to automation, it's something that we've been asked about a lot over the years, isn't it? It's around how you automate actions and how you link the right actions to the right person on the back of the survey results. And I'm just going to spend 2 seconds, well, maybe a little bit longer, just talking through the almost thinking that we went through to develop our own action planning tool, because we went out to lots of frontline leaders. So making sure that it wasn't just the HR community that we went out to, because ultimately, if you can empower people leaders, the further down in the organization, whether it's middle management, as James mentioned, or whether it's going all the way down to kind of restaurants or whatever your demographic is, construction sites, manufacturing sites, what we heard over and over again is it has to be simple. If you're going to get me to build an action plan and engage with it, it needs to be simple. So we developed this based on 3 steps to success. So it tells people what their focus areas are based on their survey results and an algorithm that sits within that, so that they know if they do those actions, it's going to impact on their engagement score the most. Make it easy for me to take action and know what to do. If you can help me do that, brilliant. And that will help me do the 3rd thing, which is around driving change. So that's what our action planning tool does. It will pull out the top 3 focus areas. And this one I think is particularly relevant today about acting on the results of the survey. It links nicely into you said we did and action planning. But from there, you can add a goal, and you could say, implement a you said we did campaign. I'll call it something fancier.
I'm fed up with that one, yeah.
Add the goal, and then it will populate this into the action plan for you. But better than that, you can then either create a custom action, or you can search the action library, and link to that. It will help you understand the articles, the prompts that are going to impact that question the most. So empower employees by involving them in decision making, enhance transparency in communication channels. If you go in there, we're not expecting people to read books, but there is benefits, there are bullet points, you can add it to your goal, you created your action plan, and off you go. So you can set a timeline and all that kind of good stuff. So I think the the simpler you can make the action planning process and also give you the visibility to see what actions are happening across your organizations, then the easier we're going to make it. But you have to keep it simple. But we also know that not everyone has a fancy kind of platform and a fancy action planning tool. So what we wanted to do next was kind of really talk to what you can do when you haven't got an action planning tool in place, or kind of the capability to do that as well. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and then Mel is going to talk you through kind of our... Sorry,
I have to comment that the eagle-eyed in our delegates here would have seen that Dawn Smedley was overdue 3 actions. So again, it just set the reminder that even the best people at employee listing that care about culture
who's got those
can
beady
still
eyes,
forget about their actions and their other action planning. So it's fine. Other people were fictional. We have a really simple 5-step approach. As Dawn says, we're really conscious that not all organizations have a platform. You're not always able to utilize technology, but it's about the ethos around action planning that we want to share and ask people to have a think about how you embed this within your organization and for the people that are leading action planning. And it's 5 simple steps. Number 1, understand. I mean, it starts with coming from a place of learning and being open to learn and hear about what the feedback has, utilizing data points to analyze it and spot where the gaps are and what can be done. Secondly, communicate. I love there's a comment that's coming through, and I think we'll come back into the chat and some of the comments there, but Mandy's comment about communicate. Yes, exactly what we need to be doing. As you know, people will almost be sick of you saying the same things, but that's okay. But it's about when we're initially communicating, as leaders, we have to have maturity to be open to feedback and not be defensive about it. We're sharing this feedback back in a balanced and inclusive way where they can add more thoughts and feedback, and almost 2 ears, 1 mouth in full swing here, where we are there to listen and accept even more feedback in that meeting rather than just oversharing. This is what's come out and this is how I feel about it. Trying to take that off the table quite quickly. The 3rd step is around planning. We like things in 3s. 3 is the magic number. It's a really simple number to plan against, but having 3 simple priorities to keep focused, that will enable you to keep that action plan focused and clear. You can do more, you can do less, but I think 3 is very much easily manageable typically for a line manager and for us to accept and communicate back as well. Number 4, sharing the progress. So it's all very well us creating a plan, but it means very little if it's then stored away in your drawer for the next 12 months until the next survey arises. So what is working well? Where are there setbacks? Having that complete openness and transparency about what's happening and having it shared often. I think it's really important if you can, and if you have a communications vehicle or channel that is a regular one, a regular update, regular team communications, have it as a standing agenda item. It's okay to then scoot over it and say, actually, guys, since last month when we met, we haven't really done much to progress these actions, but next month we'll come back with a full update. That's okay. At least it keeps it in front of your mind and front and center of everybody's view. And then the number 5 is iterate. You never complete engagement. This is the joy of working with people. There's always more to be doing and more to learn, but keeping that action plan alive. One action might close, but then there's something else that you can think about that can add even more value that you can now follow up with. So just understanding it's a journey and there is no real end point.
And I think just to add to some of the points that Mel made there, it's like, you know, it's a great opportunity to try and understand what's working well, what actions are really working, and how is that impacting on the wider organization in terms of the difference that it's making, and how can you replicate that in other parts of the business as well. I think it's just a powerful way of kind of moving the whole business forward so it's not siloed. But it often sounds easier when you say it than it is when you're doing it in practice. We know that. But hopefully kind of that gives you some structure around kind of even just the steps you can take just when it comes to action planning, and having some structure around that as well. Just picking up on some of the chats. Will, are you good if I read this out? Mega awkward scenario. There's someone at senior level who does not observe the cultural standards of the organisation, but they are extremely effective, productive in the eyes of the senior leaders, board members, and so everyone works around them. And the recommendations from the survey results make this individual's behaviour stand out. How to avoid losing the credibility of your action plan. Ooh.
Need a cup of tea for this one, I think. This one's a really difficult one because managing around stakeholders, especially when they're successful stakeholders, despite the lack of cultural fit, is really tough. This can take often years of work around, just because that leader is probably quite unlikely to change their behavior immediately, or needs to go through a bit of a personal journey themselves and acknowledging the impact that their behavior is having on a wider, on the wider organization and teams amongst them. I think for me, there's a piece around what is their line manager saying as well. Is there an ability to have that kind of conversation and understand how the performance is affected? What do they want out of that person ultimately? Is there a way of taking that person to a side, having the right person influence them in the right conversation as well? So there's certain HR business partners where I know that they've got on very well with the leader and they've been able to make that change and make them see what their behavior is doing and the influence it's having across the wider organization. But it can take quite a bit of time, and it's just not giving up on the fight, I think, and not giving up on making sure that things move forward. I think also what I've used in the past is, you've got the problem with this leader, that they probably won't make their action move, but this leader will, and they're a bit of a golden star for the engagement campaign and what you're doing with the action planning, demonstrating the strides that that person makes over the course of your surveys and that impact on employee experience that that person has versus this person, quite often is quick wake-up call, and something that, the numbers don't lie, the data leads the data.
Okay, so we've got some, I hope that helps, Will. Mandy, this has been helpful. We're getting into action following our first EES survey in over 4 years. Well done. Well done for bringing it back. So a helpful reminder to communicate, and make sure we link back to reminders of survey results and the action plans were generated from employee focus groups. Time goes quickly. So 2024 is about acting, communicating pre a 2025 EES survey. Absolutely. It does go so quickly. Heather asks, what recommendations do you give to leaders who do not have enough direct reports for their own data? We've seen that they don't feel the larger data for their department or division lands for them. They have to have conversations with their direct teams around the data, and that can be overwhelming or time consuming.
Good question. I think for me, it's about making sure, again, this is what we were saying earlier, understanding, if they're ideally they get feedback. We go down to groups of 5 within our organization. So, is there a way of adapting that and making sure that there is enough direct reports in their area? But if not, then how do they join forces with another area so that that action plan is much more tailored to them? If it's too far a step up, is there a way of them combining their report within another team that is more on the same level and similar experiences as them, so that those leaders can play a bigger part? But also there's ways of just having conversations potentially, but I appreciate that is more of a time drag. Dawn, you look like you want to say something.
No, keep going.
Okay. But I think, I understand that the conversations may be too time consuming. So I would look to combine teams at times in that case. I've had it in the past where there's a team of EAs, executive assistants or personal assistants, depending on what you want to call them, plus a communications team. And we ended up combining those because they are supporting leadership teams. They have broad remits, but it's a lot of admin tasks. But at least it enabled those two leaders of those smaller teams to come together and action plan.
Yeah. I hope that helped, Heather. Ashley says, we are struggling with step 4 share. We have about 1,100 leaders who have access to their scores and are empowered to share the engagement data with their teams and action plan based on the team's feedback. However, we don't have a systematic way of sharing progress or outcomes across the system. Any suggestions?
Great question. And it's almost a question back. Should you have a systematic way of checking in with them that they have shared the progress? Is there, it depends on your culture, a way of them almost logging that they've done it, or using, again, this is a typical, you can tell that I'm a third child here, but having a golden child and showing that this leader is fantastic, and look at what they've shared, somebody that shares their story and narrative about what they've done with their teams and putting their actions into place, that all of a sudden can create activity that you want influencing downwards and across the wider business. But also, a question that I love in our surveys is about looking backwards. And we ask sometimes for different clients, depending on what they want, if your line manager has acted on the results of the last survey. I can tell you that that's a big kicker for line managers to start action planning and sharing feedback. And it definitely makes them move. I've done it in the past when I was in-house as well, where I told line managers at the end of one survey that question would be entering the next survey. Call it just, you know, a little bit of cheeky gamification, but it definitely helps them
Positively
see that they have to
influencing, Mel, is how I like to think of it.
yeah.
Positively
Here's the apple.
influencing.
But yeah, I'll dangle the carrot, but I didn't have to get the stick out in that case. But I would say as well, you know, if you've got any systems that can help them tick off the box that I have done this, pieces like that, but also that follow-up check-in from their direct reports, that data will tell you.
And I think often it's about enabling your HR business partners, if you have that type of structure or other leads that might be engagement leads or whatever you have internally as well, to set them up for success in terms of supporting their areas of the business and the leaders, because they'll know them better than anyone in terms of what's going on in their worlds. And again, it's keeping it front of mind. So when they're touching base with them, it's keeping that as an agenda item to say, you know, we absolutely want to make sure that actually action is happening on the back of it. What have you been doing? What conversations have you been having with your teams? Is there anything I can help with? Do you understand the results? Is there anything I can walk you through? And almost positioning it with them around kind of what we talked about earlier, which is things that they control, things that they can influence, and things that we can't do anything about, but helping them feel confident enough to go back and to be talking about kind of the actions on the back of the survey and what they can be doing as well. That can be really helpful. And Ashley says, oh, thank you for that. We do tell all employees what's going on for full transparency.
Yeah, it does keep people honest.
Amazing. Well, any more questions? Because we are coming up to we're on the hour. That went quick. I hope that's been really helpful for everyone. We will be following up with a recording of today. We will be following up with the slides, and we'll probably pop in some stuff that we mentioned as well. But we're doing another webinar. We do all of our webinars on the 2nd of May, which is around securing support for employee listening surveys. We've got one of our clients kind of bringing their journey to life and how they had to positively influence. We'll use that word again multiple times. So if you want to join us, feel free to do so. But thank you so much for interacting with us. I loved it today. There's been so much going on in the chat. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. If you want to find out more, me and Mel are always here. We're on LinkedIn, we're on email, we're everywhere. So just get in touch. But a massive thank you from both of us for joining us today. Have a lovely evening wherever you are in the world. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.